Previously on Patrick H. Willems.
This is Charles.
People really seem to love the coconut.
Patrick's been so focused on views and clicks and star meters.
Thing on IMDb, it tells you how famous you are.
You and me are gonna have a little conversation.
Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video and helping to keep the lights on at Patrick H. Willems' headquarters.
The Newsly Times presents what's new in news. Seems the world is going nuts. Coconuts, that is. Yes, not since the discovery of piña coladas have Americans been so enamored by these tropical fruits. And what's the source of this commotion? Why, this little fella here. Charlemania has swept the nation. Ever since this googly-eyed angel rolled off his palm tree and onto a moderately successful YouTube channel, people can't get enough of him. He may be only 4 inches tall, but Charles is becoming a titan of Tinseltown. There are talks of a Charles cartoon on Disney XD, an official Charles mobile game, and romance rumors galore. With so many mountains climbed and kingdoms conquered, it seems Charles can do no wrong. At the risk of editorializing, if I had had the chance to work with Charles and instead chose to move back to my hometown, I'd be kicking myself right now. I would probably pick up the bottle and never put it down. Why, only the dumbest, thick-skulled moron would have to say no to that offer.
I should have killed that fucking coconut when I had the chance.
All of the world is wondering with bated breath, what's next for this hairy wonder boy? What will he and his team think of next?
Yeah, these shoes have been missing for a full year now.
I'm here. I've got it. What did I miss?
Oh, I was just congratulating Jake on his promotion. Say hello to our new Vice Chancellor of Content. Jake, here's your crown. Wow. That was Charles' idea.
Jake, I thought you hated Charles.
Oh, well, we had a nice conversation over the holidays and smoothed things over.
Well, that's good news.
And that's not all. In Q2, we are rebooting Jake's Politics Corner. It's gonna be a great year. Our star meter rankings keep climbing, and if we wanna keep this momentum going, we need to kick off 2021 with something big. An essay topic so vast, so nebulous, that it would seem impossible to cover in a single video, but not for us.
You mean we're finally covering the Resident Evil franchise?
Oh, Minions. It's gotta be Minions.
What? No, come on, guys. I'm obviously talking about pop music needle drops in movies. And speaking of music, Chloe?
Here it is.
What is it?
Our new theme song.
It's Patrick's show. Take my hand and off we go. Dive into wine and filament. Just don't call it content. It's Patrick's show.
In this video, I'm going to give many examples of different kinds of needle drops in movies. Dozens and dozens of examples. But I'm not going to list every single one ever because there are like hundreds of thousands and that would be impossible. So if I don't mention your favorite one, I'm sorry. You're welcome to complain about it in the comments section, but just know that I'm not going to read it. This is a video about what we're calling needle drops, as in the use of pre-existing popular music within a piece of cinema. We are not talking about original scores composed for films, and we are not talking about songs performed by the characters. So no musicals, no music biopics, and sadly, no Purple Rain. For the past 60 years or so, movies and TV have been packed wall to wall with pop music. We're so used to it that it's easy to forget how strange the idea of it actually is. When you're watching a movie, the footage is all material shot just for that movie. The score was composed and recorded just for that movie. And then suddenly, on the soundtrack, a song comes on that was recorded 30 years earlier. And you go, hey, I remember when that played at my friend's bar mitzvah. These are found elements with their own history being dropped into an entirely new context, and they often come with their own baggage. The more famous the song, the more associations the audience is going to have with it. Maybe they already associate it with a scene from another film. And this puts a huge challenge on the filmmakers. Can they use the song in a way that transcends this baggage? And then there's the big question. Why use an existing song that risks distracting the audience and taking them out of the moment, instead of the more traditional film score that's way less obtrusive? Well, we're gonna find out. What I want to do here is create a system for categorizing every different function a needle drop can have. We've got 60+ years of songs and movies to look at, and hopefully, by the end of this, we can easily categorize what every single song is doing. And remember, my system is built on hard, irrefutable science, so if you question these results, you're just gonna make yourself sound foolish. This will be like a guide for filmmakers, to help them figure out what they want a song to accomplish, what the best way to do it is, and hopefully discourage them from making lazy choices. In other words, I really just want this video to convince people to never ever put sympathy for the devil in a movie again. Please. In a 1995 essay, film critic Mark Kermode wrote, "The relationship between rock music and movies is both long-standing and multifarious. At its best, pop music can inspire and enliven directors. It can accompany, counterpoint, boost, or ironically comment upon their visual work in a unique and sometimes spine-tingling manner. It can create an instant period location, establishing with just a few choice chords, haunting vocal phrases, or distinctive drum beats, an authentically rich milieu from over 5 decades of social history. Perhaps more than any other art form, pop music is a disposable, transient product which reflects, mimics, and occasionally shapes the zeitgeist. As such, pop music can serve as a film's memory, instantaneously linking it with its audience, tapping into a nostalgic past, or fixing the film firmly in the present." Okay, so now that we've covered all that, we need to step back a bit and ask ourselves an important question. What is the purpose of film music anyway? Why not have every scene just be silent? I'm not the guy to answer that question. So I brought in an expert, Brian Matolius, our composer who recently wrote us that killer new theme song.
That's the million-dollar question. But to that, I posit another question, which is, have you ever watched something without it? The film music acts as basically this invisible hand that is guiding you subconsciously, how to contextualize what you're looking at emotionally or intellectually, but it's like, it's the subtext when you're reading a novel. It's like telling you why you should feel this certain way about a character doing a certain thing or saying a certain thing. When you don't have it, you don't engage mentally or think about too hard what's being shown in front of you. Even silent movies, when they were first made, always had a piano player in front of the screen playing a score. Now, the word score comes from sheet music. When a theater got a reel, it also came with sheet music. It came with the score for that. So whenever they would show the film, they would make sure that their piano player had the score in front of them and would play along with the action. So even before talkies and before there was a soundtrack, the importance of music has always been there with film, because without it, it just doesn't engage you in the same way.
Okay, so now as we start to categorize all needle drops, the first thing to do is divide them into two major categories: diegetic and non-diegetic. In simplest terms, diegetic means the music exists within the world of the film and the characters can hear it. So this is diegetic.
All my instincts, they return.
Non-diegetic means the characters can't hear it because it exists outside of the reality of the film. So like, this would be non-diegetic. We're gonna talk about non-diegetic needle drops first. When a song is only there for the audience to hear, it's essentially functioning like the musical score. The difference is that while a score is generally meant to be somewhat invisible, to add to the storytelling without drawing attention to itself, we're meant to notice needle drops. These are catchy pop songs right at the front of the audio mix. So when there's a non-diegetic song right there for us to notice, the next question to ask is, whose perspective is the song coming from?
The first thing you should be asking yourself is, well, whose scene is this? You know, whose point of view is this scene from? From a story standpoint, it's really important that you understand X character's reaction to what is happening in this scene.
A lot of the time, non-diegetic needle drops are there to take us inside a character's perspective and tell us what they're feeling. The end by The Doors at the beginning of Apocalypse Now puts us right into Willard's head, capturing his nihilistic, hallucinatory state of mind. These Days, in the Royal Tenenbaums, immediately tells us how Richie and Margot Tenenbaum are feeling as they see each other for the first time in years. Sometimes the lyrics do the heavy lifting. In Drive, Ryan Gosling plays an emotionally stunted weirdo who just never really talks to people. And then he meets his neighbors and helps them out, and he takes them for a fun drive and actually starts to feel like how normal people are supposed to feel. But it would be kind of weird if Gosling suddenly said, "Wow, I feel like a real human being and a real hero." So the soundtrack is there to do that for him.
Real human being and a real hero.
In Lost in Translation, the opening needle drop of Girls by Death in Vegas captures the exhausted, dreamlike state that Bob is in as he arrives in Tokyo. And at the end of the movie, when Bob and Charlotte say goodbye, Just Like Honey by the Jesus and Mary Chain comes on the soundtrack to capture that emotion that hits them as they walk away, and that sense of loss they both feel starts to kick in. In Boogie Nights, we enter Scotty J's perspective as he checks out hot guys at the pool as You Sexy Thing plays on the soundtrack.
You sexy thing, sexy thing.
It's not subtle, but it's pretty funny. One of my personal favorite non-diegetic character perspective needle drops comes in Edgar Wright's The World's End. In the opening scene, we learn about how Gary King is obsessed with his teenage years in the early 90s, and what he wants more than anything is to return to that time. And here, one needle drop takes us through his entire thought process. As the camera slowly pushes in on him, Loaded by Primal Scream from their 1991 album Screamadelica begins to play. It begins with an audio sample from the film Wild Angels, declaring,
"Well, we want to be free. We want to be free to do what we want to do. And we want to get loaded. And we want to have a good time."
As a smile slowly spreads across his face, we can see Gary's mind returning to that earlier period in his life, and we realize the idea he's having. And as he reaches his moment of epiphany, the song kicks in, the title appears, and the story has officially begun. So we have a song that the character obviously likes and associates with a specific time of his life that he wants to return to. An audio sample in the song that represents what the character wants to do, and the actual music capturing his emotional state. That, my friends, is a good needle drop. So now within the category of non-diegetic character perspective needle drops, we have a subcategory. One of the most common examples of this technique is an instance when awkward, lame, nerdy people who are usually white are feeling confident, so the movie shows them walking in slow motion while a hip-hop song plays.
Every day I'm hustling, every day I'm hustling. I need you to hurry up now, cause I can't wait much longer. Here comes the outstep. 23 below with a snowball effect. I squirt while they wreck, screaming, yes, I am guilty, mother. Sicker than your average, pop a twist cabbage on. But I won't flex till it's time to have sex.
This was pretty funny when Mike Judge did it 22 years ago in Office Space. The ironic disconnect between the music and the characters really worked. I mean, Weird Al made a whole hit song based on that concept. But 20 years later, it has been done so many times that it's just become a cliche that we should probably retire. But look, if we're talking about non-diegetic character perspective needle drops, we gotta talk about how Scorsese does it. No one is better at this kind of needle drop than famed Marvel fanboy Martin Scorsese. He's probably more associated with using pop music in movies than any other filmmaker, except maybe Tarantino, who we'll get to soon. While he's made movies with great traditional film scores, like Bernard Herrmann's score for Taxi Driver, many of his soundtracks are largely constructed out of existing pop music, with an emphasis on rock music from the 60s and 70s. Now, some people, like Todd Phillips, seem to think that all it takes to use music like Scorsese is to throw a 70s rock song in your movie. This is not the case. To explain how Scorsese does this, we need to talk about the difference between objective and subjective perspective in filmmaking. And treating this like a shrewd parent, let me say that neither is better than the other. They're both special in their own ways. Objective filmmaking is when the visual storytelling is portraying the story from the perspective of an omniscient observer, simply watching what is happening. And subjective filmmaking is when the visual storytelling is telling the story from the perspective of a specific character, so the audience feels how the character is feeling. Scorsese is one of the masters of subjective filmmaking. With his shot choices and camera movements and Thelma Schoonmaker's great editing, he's able to put us in the shoes of the main character. And a key part of that is the music he chooses. So we all remember the iconic moment of Robert De Niro entering the bar in Mean Streets as Jumpin' Jack Flash by the Rolling Stones plays on the soundtrack. But it's easy to forget a key part of this moment. The scene is told from Harvey Keitel's perspective. The first 15 seconds of the song play over a dramatic push-in on Keitel, and then it cuts to De Niro. This moment isn't about how cool De Niro is, it's about how Keitel sees him. When most filmmakers make period pieces, for the soundtrack they settle for simply picking the most popular, well-known songs from the years the movie is set. But that is simply where Scorsese starts. So let's look at Goodfellas. As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to make a video about the music in Goodfellas. And I probably should have just made this whole video about that. Oh well, too late to turn back now. So the whole movie is told from Henry Hill's perspective, and he's the one narrating it all. So the music underlines his emotional arc. In the early parts, when he's just a wide-eyed young guy getting into the gangster business, the music is all upbeat pop hits from the 60s, like Then He Kissed Me by the Crystals. As it goes on, the pop gives way to rock, and and by the time Henry is coked out of his mind and selling guns while being tailed by police helicopters, the soundtrack has evolved into frenzied, chaotic, psychedelic rock music. In a 1990 Boston Globe interview, Scorsese explained that he chooses songs only if they, quote, comment on the scenes or the characters in an oblique way. He's not going for the obvious picks that just tell us what we can plainly see on screen. He's choosing songs that tell us something new about the story or the characters. Like, take the piano outro from Layla over the scene of all the mobsters being whacked. In that song, this comes at the end of a thrilling rock song, and here it's signifying the end of the golden era the characters have been living through. And look, you can't talk about Scorsese's needle drops without mentioning Robbie Robertson, who has worked with Scorsese since the 70s and helped select a lot of these iconic needle drops. Although according to my dad, because he and Marty were tight, Robertson got too much screen time in The Last Waltz at the expense of other band members like Levon Helm.
Take a load off Fanny. Take a load for free.
The term leitmotif comes from opera and refers to a short musical phrase associated with a person or place or thing. In other words, it's like a theme. So the Jaws theme is the leitmotif for the shark. In Star Wars, famous leitmotifs are the Imperial March, or Princess Leia's theme, or Yoda's theme. And needle drops can also function as leitmotifs. At the beginning of Thor Ragnarok, Led Zeppelin's Immigrant Song is used as a leitmotif to represent Thor being confident and awesome, so at his peak. And then, Thor loses his hammer and his confidence, and the song is gone for the rest of the movie, until the climax, when he regains his confidence and rediscovers his power, and the leitmotif returns. The fact that this works so well makes it extra annoying that in Infinity War, in the big scene where Thor arrives with his new hammer to save the day, instead of playing Immigrant Song, they just played the leitmotif for the Avengers. But look, the problems with Marvel's music is too big a conversation to get into here, so I'll just say Zeppelin rules. And now, let's shift perspective, away from needle drops that come from the character's perspective, and over to the ones that really come from the perspective of the director. Or you could say these are objective instead of subjective. They're not tied to a character's emotional state, they're coming from up above, the storyteller using them to tell us something. Sometimes this is as simple as substituting them for a traditional score, and using the song to create a mood or feeling. Like Bittersweet Symphony by The Verve at the end of Cruel Intentions doesn't really have anything to do with how the characters are feeling. And the lyrics about being a slave to money then you die are totally irrelevant to this story, but the sound of it really captures the big melodramatic climax with doors being flung open and spinning cameras and helicopter shots, so it works. But more often, this kind of needle drop ends up being really lazy.
Yeah, I had a chance to look at the green room setup, and it was garbage. Charles is a guest on your show, and you decide to put coconut milk in it? How would you feel if you walked into your dressing room and it was filled with human blood? Well, most people would hate it. Hold on one second. Chloe, what's up? I got James Corden on the other line.
Wow, I was wondering if you could help me with an assignment Patrick gave me. He asked me to compile every time Sympathy for the Devil is played in a movie. He says if he listens to that song one more time, he will, quote, go ballistic X versus Sever, which I think means kill me with a robot.
So what's your question?
Where do I even start with that?
Okay, what you're gonna do is you're gonna open up an Excel spreadsheet. I use it all the time. It's perfect for cataloging my favorite breakfast cereals.
What's your number one pick?
Reese's Puff cereal, Chloe. It cranks up the volume on my taste buds. Listen, I gotta go. I am swamped trying to organize all of Charles' media appearances. Listen, you got this. There's nothing you can't do.
really think so? Jake? There's nothing I can't do. I'm in New York. These streets will make me feel brand new. Big lights will inspire you. Let's hear it for...
These are usually the kind of needle drops that make you roll your eyes. They're often used as a way of world building, to introduce the audience to a particular time or place. So, let's say the characters in a movie are going to London. Here are 3 clips from, I swear to God, 3 different movies.
London calling to the underworld. London calling to the faraway towns. London calling to the faraway towns.
Now, it may be hard to tell, but if you pay really close attention to the lyrics of the song, what it's telling us is that we're now in London. Robert Zemeckis, a filmmaker who has made many movies that I love, is one of the worst offenders here. The Zemeckis approach to a needle drop is to find a song that is already extremely well known, and then use it in the most literal way possible. Fortunate Son by Creedence Clearwater Revival is a song commonly associated with the Vietnam War. So in Forrest Gump, he plays it over a scene introducing the Vietnam War. Under the Bridge by the Red Hot Chili Peppers is a song about drug use. So in Flight, Zemeckis plays it over a scene of a character using drugs. This is also how you end up with something like the needle drops in Captain Marvel. There is a running theme to all of them. They're songs from the 90s sung by female vocalists, which is fine, but at no point do they tell us anything other than in what decade the movie is set. They don't communicate what Carol Danvers is feeling or thinking. She has no relationship with these songs. They don't tell us anything about the characters. They don't create any tone. They're just there. The one that everyone remembers is no doubt Just a Girl during the climactic fight scene. And this is the only song that does seem to be intended to have some subtext, to represent Carol triumphing over the men who have underestimated her because she's a woman. But the problem is, that's not what is happening in the movie. Carol's gender doesn't really play a major role in this story. In this scene, she's breaking free from the control of the Kree Supreme Intelligence, which has taken the form of Annette Bening. This isn't a case of a patriarchal system underestimating and oppressing her, but that's how the needle drop wants us to feel. It's trying to manufacture a triumphant girl power moment that just isn't there in the story, and that's why it rings so hollow. The whole soundtrack feels like a decision made during the editing process as opposed to something the filmmakers planned when they were shooting the movie. It's trying to create another Guardians of the Galaxy without understanding why the songs in that movie work. And yes, we're going to talk about Guardians soon. And then there's something like Suicide Squad. Look, a lot has been said about that movie's bizarre production, where the movie was significantly reworked by multiple editing teams to make it feel closer to its upbeat, pop music-filled trailers. And the result is a soundtrack that clearly cost a fucking ton of money, yet means absolutely nothing. When it introduces a location in New Orleans, it plays House of the Rising Sun, because it's a song that mentions New Orleans. For a scene where a character is portrayed as crazy, it plays Super Freak. And yes, when it introduces a character who seems dangerous, it plays Sympathy for the Devil. These are like the "that's Chappie" of needle drops. It's the filmmaker pointing at a scene of the Vietnam War and saying, "That's the Vietnam War," or a character who seems like a badass and saying, "She's a badass," or a scene clearly set in the 90s and saying, "It's the 90s." I know audiences can be dumb, but they're not that dumb. But look, these kinds of needle drops are not inherently bad. Like any needle drop, they just need to be chosen well. Take the use of the Rolling Stones' Out of Time in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's non-diegetic and isn't being used to express any character's emotions or point of view. It is being placed there by the storyteller as a sort of commentary on what is happening in the story. Assuming we're all aware of the real events the movie is based around, we know that the story is leading to the massacre of Sharon Tate and her friends at the hands of the Manson family. We've spent the whole movie hanging out with these characters and having fun as they live their lives, but now that's coming to an end. As the song announces, we are out of time. That goes for all the characters. Rick and Cliff's partnership and maybe friendship is about to come to an end. They're out of time. And if you want to add another layer to it, the song is announcing that we're about to diverge from the actual historical timeline of events. If time moves along a straight path, then the story is going to step out of time into a new timeline. It's ominous, it's tragic, it's bittersweet. This is a great needle drop. And yeah, we're gonna talk more about Tarantino soon. Before we discuss diegetic needle drops, I have to mention one very special example. This one scene in the movie Hot Rod, where there's a needle drop that seems non-diegetic, but then suddenly it reveals that characters in the scene are singing the song and it becomes diegetic. Let's call this the non-diegetic but surprise it's a musical needle drop. These are extremely rare, but also extremely funny. A strange phenomenon is that sometimes what's even more memorable than a needle drop in a movie is a needle drop in the trailer. For the rest of my life, I am going to associate Black Skinhead with The Wolf of Wall Street, or Friction with Mission Impossible Fallout, or Creep with The Social Network. And none of those songs actually appear in the movies themselves. Trailers are such fascinating, complex pieces of filmmaking that, unfortunately, there just is not room to talk about them in this video. But if you want to learn more about how they work and how to make them, you should check out the class, The Art of Making Video Trailers by Olaf de Fleur on Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes for creative and curious people of every skill level on topics like filmmaking, illustration, design, music, writing, and many more, even stuff like cooking. Most classes are under 60 minutes with short lessons that can easily fit into any schedule. My schedule is absurd, and I can still fit in Skillshare lessons. An annual membership is less than $10 a month, but the first 1,000 people who sign up at the link in the description right down there will get a free trial of a premium Skillshare membership, so you can take as many classes as you want during that time. Look, it's the winter, there's a pandemic going, you're stuck inside, it's gonna be like 2 weeks or so until my next episode. Why don't you use that time to learn some new stuff? And then, there are diegetic needle drops.
What are you listening to? Music.
These are the ones the characters can hear. The ones playing on car radios and jukeboxes and in clubs and at school dances. These can tell us about the setting of the film. In the Mark Kermode essay I referenced earlier, he quotes British film producer Steve Woolley, who describes pop music as the cheapest form of period scenery. As effective as the costumes and set design in American Graffiti or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood are at establishing the time period, the constant era-specific music playing on the radio as characters drive around town does just as much heavy lifting. But I think the most useful thing about diegetic needle drops is what it can tell us about the characters. We learn something about the characters from what music they choose to listen to, like what they put on when they're alone. Playing Creedence Clearwater Revival over scenes of the Vietnam War has been a cliche for decades, but there's a way to use the band well. Since they're so associated with Vietnam, when Walter listens to them in his car in The Big Lebowski, it's telling us more about how deep his Vietnam obsession goes. A character can choose a song to send a message. Sometimes words just aren't enough, so you need to turn to the dulcet tones of Peter Gabriel. Or a song can send a threat, like in The Warriors.
And I do mean the Warriors. Here's a hit with them in mind.
Or in the final scene of Moonlight, Kevin puts a song on the jukebox to try to break through the walls that Chiron is putting up.
Hello, stranger.
The jukebox is a useful narrative tool because it's in a public place, so characters are essentially picking a song for an audience. If you happen to turn on Pee-wee's Big Adventure halfway through, you understand exactly who he is based on what song he puts on the biker bar jukebox. The jukebox is also a way to establish a power dynamic, as it gives one character control over the soundtrack. And learning about a character's taste in music can tell us more about who they are and what they want. Like Faye, the girl at the snack bar in Chungking Express, who constantly listens to California Dreamin'. This concept is what the entire film Baby Driver is built around. The main character is curating the entire soundtrack himself. All the music is chosen by him to express how he's feeling at that moment, and it centers the film entirely in his perspective. This is similar to how the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtracks work. All the needle drops come from the awesome mixes that Peter Quill's mother made for him. They frame the whole movie from the perspective of this kind of dopey, immature guy from Earth who sees everything through the lens of late 70s, early 80s pop culture. And it grounds all the weird, fantastical, cosmic stuff we're watching in a language we understand. And we can learn a lot about characters from how they react to music. Are they the kind of people who spontaneously start dancing in a convenience store? Or in a Kmart? It can tell us what kind of mood they're in. And you can learn a lot about a character from their taste in music.
I really hate that kind of music.
In the film Tommy Boy, the whole dynamic between the two main characters is established via their reactions to songs on the radio.
Don't you remember you told me you love me, baby?
And recently, Promising Young Woman uses a needle drop to show how the relationship between two characters is developing, that they trust each other enough to admit that they both know all the words to the Paris Hilton song, Stars Are Blind. And yes, I had also forgotten that Paris Hilton once made music. People's shared love of a song can bring them back together after a difficult time.
She just laughs. The boulevard is not that bad.
This is something Cameron Crowe really gets, the cathartic power of the right song at the right time. Like the scene in Jerry Maguire where he searches through the radio to find the right song to sing along to express how he's feeling.
Breaking her heart.
Okay, this might seem like a weird thing to say, but hear me out. I don't think we appreciate how incredibly powerful a storytelling device the radio is. It's like this otherworldly force that sometimes will decide to play the perfect song at the perfect moment. And because this is just how movies work and the radio seems to play songs randomly, we just accept it.
J'aime bien la radio. Il suffit d'allumer. On tombe toujours pile sur la musique qui nous trottait tout au fond. Tu vas voir, c'est magique.
Sometimes you've got a needle drop that could be really on the nose and kind of lame if it was non-diegetic. Like playing Gimme More by Britney Spears over a montage in the movie Hustlers. But the movie makes it work by introducing the song diegetically. As the main characters are buying an Escalade, they switch on the radio and the song comes on.
It's Britney, bitch.
What? Yeah, shit. That's my motherfucking song right there.
Now, this song becomes their anthem. It means something to them. Everything is working out for them, even the radio is giving them the perfect song. So as it plays over the next scene, it's telling us that they are in control. Or in one of the greatest scenes in 21st century cinema, in Magic Mike XXL. When Big Dick Richie decides he's going to perform for the bored-looking girl at the convenience store, suddenly, the radio gives him the perfect song. I Want It That Way by the Backstreet Boys. A song we may have dismissed back when it was ubiquitous in 1999, and we laugh when it starts to play because, right, that song. And then we start to remember that this song is actually a fucking banger. And this scene that starts so silly becomes kind of awesome and sort of moving and triumphant, and we realize this is a song fundamentally about desire, which is what this whole movie is about. And then Richie says, "How much for the Cheetos and water?"
How much for the Cheetos and water?
And we stand up and applaud right there in the theater. It's a great scene. A totally different version of this is in Shaun of the Dead, when a needle drop comes at the least appropriate moment. The characters are freaking out and trapped and being attacked by zombies, and suddenly the jukebox switches on, and Don't Stop Me Now by Queen kicks in. A horror scene is suddenly subverted by a song with the complete opposite tone. And then, obviously, there's this. Other than Scorsese, there's probably no filmmaker better known for their use of music than Quentin Tarantino. Like, say what you want about him, he's way too into women's feet and the N-word, but we can all agree that his soundtracks slap. But other than picking cool songs, what is so special about the way he uses them? The thing about Tarantino is that the vast majority of his needle drops are diegetic. In his movies, the characters are constantly listening to music. They listen to the radio in the car, they put on records at home, they buy cassette tapes. For younger viewers, cassette tapes are those things that Star-Lord listens to music on in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. This shouldn't be significant, but it is. In countless movies, characters just never listen to or think about music at all. But we all listen to music regularly in our day-to-day lives. When I wrote this part of the script, I was listening to the score for the movie Thief by Tangerine Dream. And after I'm done shooting this, I'll probably make myself a drink and put on Parade by Prince. Tarantino fundamentally understands how much a character's relationship with music can tell us about them. It can tell us about their musical taste, what kind of mood they're in, what kind of mood they want to create. When Max Cherry goes to a store to buy the Delphonics album that Jackie Brown told him about, and then listens to it in his car, that tells us something about what he's feeling. And then you've got a scene like this one.
Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right, here I am, stuck in the middle with you.
Throughout all of Reservoir Dogs, the characters are listening to a radio station called K-Billy's Super Sounds of the 70s. So this whole violent crime drama is scored to 1970s pop music. And these upbeat songs clash with the events we're watching, revealing how banal all this crime and murder really is. These are not mythic figures, they're not romanticized gangsters, they're just people. Like, instead of scoring this scene of a cop tailing some criminals to dramatic thriller music, Tarantino does this.
Ooga chaka, ooga, ooga, ooga chaka, ooga, ooga.
And so back to Stuck in the Middle with You. Using this song in this scene, while it creates this unsettling tonal disconnect for the audience, it tells us more about Mr. Blonde. What's most memorable about this scene is the way that he's having fun. For him, torturing and maiming a man is just a casual thing to do. He's dancing and singing along as if he was just painting his garage or something. The needle drop makes it clear what a sadistic psychopath he really is. If you ask people to name their favorite needle drops in movies, which I did recently on Twitter to gather material for this video, you're going to get a lot of mentions of ironic uses of upbeat pop songs during violent scenes. Scorsese was doing this in 1967 with his very first film. Tarantino does it. Spoilers for The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, but when Stellan Skarsgård traps Daniel Craig in his murder dungeon, he puts on Enya's Orinoco Flow. Maybe the ultimate example is Patrick Bateman in American Psycho listening to pop music as he kills people with axes.
Hey, Paul!
These songs throw us off balance. It's one thing to watch an ugly, violent scene, but then to put a song over it that feels lighthearted and fun is jarring. There's this tonal dissonance that sticks with us more than regular ominous music would. When these murderers choose to listen to music when doing their murdering, it reveals something about how ordinary an activity this is for them. This one isn't a murder scene, but a great ironic needle drop comes in the movie Ant-Man, when Yellow Jacket accidentally voice commands an iPhone to play a song by The Cure.
I'm gonna disintegrate you!
Playing Disintegration by The Cure.
The moment grounds what is a pretty fantastical scene that's pretty much all visual effects, and then the grandeur of the song played against these tiny characters in a briefcase makes the scene even funnier. I'll say it, Ant-Man. Underrated movie. Okay, I know this is like the longest video ever, but there's one more example I need to talk about because this one is special. It's the set of needle drops in the Rayhad Jackson sequence in Boogie Nights. So here, Dirk Diggler and his friends, who are stressed out and high as fuck, show up to a drug dealer's house to try and scam him. And Rayhad, the drug dealer, he puts on a tape of music and he keeps singing along to it.
Jesse's girl, I'm jealous. I wanna have Jesse's girl.
And this gives him the control and power in the scene, and it throws off Dirk and his crew. They're trying to focus, but the music keeps playing just a bit too loud, and this guy keeps singing, and all the chaos of it ramps up the feeling of anxiety to crazy levels. It's this deranged, suspenseful scene where Jesse's Girl is playing at full blast as these guys are trying to stay focused. Boogie Nights as a whole is kind of a masterclass in needle drops, since it has every different type. There's diegetic ones, non-diegetic ones, character perspective, director's perspective. It's got everything. And then, on a totally different note, there are those moments when the right needle drop hits a character in just the right emotional state and compels them to get up and dance. Like for Rock Around the Clock in Cold War. Or In This World in Bad Education. Or Love My Way in Call Me By Your Name, where Elio spends most of the scene refusing to get up and dance, instead just watching Oliver dance, until he finally gives in. Or Modern Love in Mauvais Son. These moments are a catharsis. These characters, who have usually been dealing with some serious shit, can just leave that behind and express themselves physically, and as a couple French robots once said, lose yourself to dance. But the ultimate example, arguably the greatest needle drop ever, comes at the very end of Claire Denis' Beau Travail. Apologies for the bad pronunciation. It's about a French Foreign Legion soldier who spends the entire movie repressed, frustrated, and angry, devoting his entire life to being a soldier, completely unable to express any real feelings. And then, in the very final scene, standing alone in a nightclub as Corona's Rhythm of the Night plays,
Rhythm of the night. This is the rhythm of my life.
he just lets it all out.
This is the rhythm of the night.
I wish I could just play the whole scene right here, but, you know, copyright stuff. So go watch the movie. Seriously, you have to see this scene. Okay, is that everything? Is that all? Are we done? We're not done? Okay, what's next? Anachronistic needle drops. These are usually non-diegetic, like in Marie Antoinette or Django Unchained.
The problem of leisure, what to do for pleasure.
Since obviously those songs did not exist in the time the movies are set, and people did not yet have a way to play recorded music. These songs are a way of making the past accessible to modern audiences, by presenting it to us in a language we understand. Even if the people lived in an extremely different culture, they still experienced the same emotions that we do, and that's what the needle drops express. And then there's a special case like A Knight's Tale, where the ancient-sounding medieval music people are dancing to at a banquet turns into Golden Years by David Bowie. The characters aren't really listening to David Bowie. This is the movie kind of translating their music, which feels to them like David Bowie would to us. It kind of blurs the line between diegetic and non-diegetic. And speaking of needle drops that blur the line, there is our final, extremely important category: songs that start diegetic but then become the score. This is one of those perfect cinematic devices that doesn't really make sense, but also makes so much sense that we never question it. It begins with a song playing diegetically, on the radio, in a car or restaurant, or at a high school reunion, and we don't pay much attention to it since it's just quietly playing in the background. And then, as the scene reaches a dramatic peak, often with an act of violence or a kiss, the music rises up into the foreground as if it was non-diegetic. Some examples of this are Under Pressure in Grosse Pointe Blank, or Hurdy-Gurdy Man in Zodiac, or I Wanna Know What Love Is in Fucking 'Em All, or Ordinary World in Layer Cake. This is like a variation of when the radio happens to play the perfect song at the perfect time. If it suddenly just dropped in non-diegetically at the climax of the scene, it would seem jarring and make the moment laughable, like that bizarre moment in It Chapter 2. But when the song is diegetic, it's like some sort of divine intervention, the universe just knowing what song to play at this moment. It makes the moment feel inevitable, where we don't even notice the background music was signaling where the scene was going to go. A good example is the climax of Manhunter. If it just suddenly started playing In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida while Will Graham crashes through the window of Dollarhide's house, it might seem kind of weird, like, why this song?
Are you here?
But since the song was already playing in the house on the stereo, it allows the movie to do this big over-the-top music moment since it's grounded in the context of the scene. And since Dollarhide, the killer, was the one who put that song on earlier in the scene, it shifts the power dynamic toward him. Basically, if it's diegetic, you can kind of get away with almost any needle drop. One complaint I've seen come up about needle drops in the past is the baggage they bring. These are pre-existing elements that the audience may have a prior relationship with. To be fair, the same can be said of actors or even a director. But sometimes knowing a song before it appears in a movie can actually add something to it. This is a weird example, but hear me out. Take the very final scene of The Matrix. Neo has ascended to the godlike status of the One, and a cool hard rock song plays as he steps out of a phone booth and flies into the sky. It essentially functions as the score. It's powerful and confident, and let's be real, it's cool as hell. But if you're familiar with the song, then you know it's called Wake Up, and performed by a band called Rage Against the Machine. And it plays over this scene of a man who has woken up so that he can rage against the machines. It's like a perfect button underlining everything we just watched. Unless it's a song created specifically for the movie, needle drops are always going to be existing material with their own history that are being repurposed. And as a filmmaker, you need to be aware of the baggage that comes with a given song. So when Todd Phillips decided to use Rock and Roll Part 2 by Gary Glitter in a scene in Joker, I don't know, maybe he should have considered that a portion of the audience would be reminded of the fact that the singer was famously imprisoned for possession of child pornography. A less depressing but more common instance is that using a song might end up reminding the audience of other films that used it first. This is one of the most baffling things to me about Zack Snyder's Watchmen. He fills the soundtrack not just with famous songs, but famous songs that already appear in iconic scenes from classic movies. So when he puts Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries over a flashback to the Vietnam War, it just reminds us of how much better Apocalypse Now is. And when he uses The Sound of Silence, like, it just makes us think of The Graduate.
Still remain.
There's no governing authority for this, although maybe there should be. Biden, call me. But look, if the song you're thinking of using is one that everyone already associates with another scene in another movie, do you really want them being reminded of that when they're watching your movie? No, you don't. It's not just that Scorsese and Tarantino and Wes Anderson are good at finding the right moments for needle drops. A big part of it is that they pick songs that haven't already been used in a ton of movies already. The main lesson here is, don't be a Suicide Squad. No one wants to be a Suicide Squad. Okay, we are at the end, and I know what about 65% of you are thinking. Why didn't he talk about All-Star in Shrek? I'm only bringing this up because so many people responded to my Twitter survey saying it was their favorite needle drop ever, and I do not believe you. Look, I saw Shrek in theaters. Astro Lounge by Smash Mouth is one of the first CDs I ever owned, and even I didn't care that much about it back in 2001. It's fine. It's a perfectly okay needle drop that you only remember because it became a meme, and also I will admit that the sync at the beginning with Shrek slamming the door open is pretty good. But it wasn't even made for Shrek. It was a song made for Mystery Men. At least ask about that movie. Come on. Shit, I forgot to talk about the opening scene of Trainspotting. Look, that's good enough. That's good enough. I think we covered most of them. Charles, another video in the can. I think this is gonna be our year.
Hello, Charles.
We did it! Patrick finally watched Locke. I couldn't have done it without you all relentlessly nagging him on Twitter. And for that, I thank you. But now, in the wake of this victory, where do we go next? Who do you send your next tweet to, pressuring them to watch this movie? Yourself! Patrick said himself that Locke was really good.
I really liked it. I gotta say, Emma was right.
So, there's really no excuse not to see it. you too should watch Locke, and then tell me all your thoughts. I genuinely want to hear them. I like truly love this movie, and I'm not doing this as a bit. I just really, really like it. I know that it's kind of my brand now,